The Great Pyramid of Giza weighs over 6 million tons. To put that in perspective, that is heavier than the entire Burj Khalifa and the Empire State Building combined. It is a mountain of stone made of 2.3 million individual blocks, some weighing as much as 80 tons. That's the weight of a Boeing 737. In a single piece of granite. And here is the part that keeps engineers awake at night: it was built without steel. Without machines. Without electricity. Without modern mathematics. So the question remains, how were the pyramids built? If people 4,500 years ago could achieve this, what else are we underestimating about the ancient world? For centuries, historians laughed at the idea that ancient civilizations were technologically advanced. They saw the ancients as primitive, barely surviving the elements. Some joints between these massive stones are so precise, you cannot slide a razor blade between them. This isn't just good enough for the Bronze Age. Even today, with laser-guided tools and diamond-tipped saws, replicating this level of accuracy across an entire structure would be prohibitively expensive and incredibly slow. Yet the ancient Egyptians did it millions of times. And they didn't just stack them. They aligned the base of the Great Pyramid to true north with an accuracy of within 3/60ths of a degree. The white limestone casing came from Tura, across the Nile. But the massive 80-ton granite blocks for the king's chamber? Those came from Aswan, over 800 kilometers away. There were no trucks. There were no iron rails. Some architects, like Jean-Pierre Houdin, suggest an internal spiral ramp. Others point to water-powered lift systems or even complex counterweights. We see evidence of sledges in ancient art, wooden platforms used to drag stones over wet sand to reduce friction. But even with wet sand, the sheer manpower required is staggering. We're talking about a mobilized workforce of tens of thousands, not slaves, but highly skilled laborers and farmers working during the Nile's flood season. The Great Pyramid isn't just a tomb. It's a message. It stands as a testament to a level of social organization and precision engineering that we are only just beginning to decode. The truth is, we don't have the full blueprint. We have fragments. We have the how in theory, but the how in practice remains one of the greatest mysteries of human history. The pyramids don't just sit on the sand, they dominate it. They remind us that 4,500 years ago, humans weren't primitive. They were masters of the physical world in ways we can barely replicate today. For decades, the cinematic image of the pyramids involved thousands of half-naked men being whipped by cruel overseers as they dragged stones across the desert. This idea mostly comes from the Greek historian Herodotus, who wrote his accounts nearly 2,000 years after the pyramids were already ancient. But archaeology tells a different story, one that is far more complex and impressive. In the 1990s, archaeologists Mark Lehner and Zahi Hawass discovered an entire worker city near Giza, south of the Sphinx. What they found shocked the world. This wasn't a series of temporary shacks or slave pens. It was a sophisticated, planned urban center designed to support a massive, specialized workforce. Within this city, they uncovered homes, permanent structures built to house thousands. Bakeries, capable of producing enough bread to feed an army. Breweries, because in ancient Egypt, beer was a primary source of nutrition and hydration. Hospitals, facilities equipped to handle the rigors of heavy construction. Cemeteries, most importantly, burials for workers located near the pyramids themselves, an honor never granted to the unworthy. These were not slaves, they were highly respected, paid workers. We have found the pay stubs of history in the form of animal bones and pottery shards. Evidence shows that workers received bread and beer, the staples of the Egyptian diet. Meat, specifically, prime cuts of cattle, sheep, and goat. This was a massive luxury in the ancient world, proving these workers were treated like an elite strike force. Professional medical care. Analysis of skeletons found in the cemeteries shows that workers underwent successful surgeries. Broken bones were treated with splints, and even amputations healed, showing the patients were given months of recovery time. No society provides high-level surgery and convalescence for expendable slaves. In reality, Egypt didn't need extraterrestrials because they had the ultimate biological machine, the human brain. Ancient Egypt was a society of mathematicians, who understood the properties of triangles and the ratio of the diameter to the circumference of a circle long before the Greeks. Astronomers, who could align the pyramids to the stars with a margin of error that is almost zero. Architects, who understood load-bearing structures and how to distribute millions of tons of pressure. Engineers, who mastered the use of levers, sledges, and lubricants. Administrators, the unsung heroes who managed the supply chains, feeding, and rotation of 20,000 workers for 2 decades. No aliens are required, only organization, knowledge, and an incredible amount of time. When we attribute the pyramids to aliens, we rob the ancient Egyptians of their greatest achievement. They didn't have computers, but they had logic. They didn't have engines, but they had leverage. So, if it wasn't slaves and it wasn't aliens, who was it? It was a national project. Imagine the moon landing, but for the Bronze Age. The pyramids were built by a mobilized nation. During the months when the Nile flooded the fields and farming was impossible, the peasantry was drafted into a corvée system. They weren't being punished, they were paying their labor tax to a god-king who represented the stability of the entire universe. They worked in gangs with names like the Friends of Khufu or the Drunkards of Menkaure. They had team spirit. They left graffiti on the hidden stones inside the pyramid, bragging about their work. They were proud of what they were doing. We found that the Diary of Mirror, a logbook from an overseer who helped transport the limestone casing blocks from Tura to Giza. It details the use of canals to bring stones right to the base of the plateau. We found the ramps. Not a single giant ramp, but remnants of steep, internal and external ramp systems at various sites across Egypt. We found the copper chisels, the dolerite pounders, and the wooden sledges. The mystery isn't magic. The mystery is how they maintain such a high level of perfection for so long without a single mistake. That is the true alien concept to us, a society that could focus on a single goal for 20 years without distraction. The key to the greatest construction project in human history lies in the Nile River. Every year, like clockwork, the Nile flooded, covering the vast farmlands of Egypt. During these months, the farmers, the backbone of the kingdom, could not work their fields. They were effectively unemployed, waiting for the water to recede so they could plant again. But the pharaohs saw an opportunity. Instead of letting the population sit idle, the state offered them a deal. The state offered them work. This wasn't a mob of amateurs. This was a specialized, multi-tiered hierarchy. At its peak, the workforce was composed of farmers during flood season, the raw muscle required for the heavy hauling. Skilled stone masons, the year-round experts who lived in the lost city and did the precision cutting. Engineers, surveyors, and overseers, the geniuses who ensured the pyramid didn't lean or collapse. Total workforce, 20,000 to 30,000 people. This was not chaos. It was a national project. It was the Apollo program of the Bronze Age. To manage tens of thousands of people in the middle of a desert, the Egyptians developed a system of organization that would make a modern CEO jealous. Workers were divided into massive teams called fils, or za, in Egyptian. But these weren't just boring departments. Each team had its own identity. Each team had a name, a leader, a specific quota. How do we know they were proud of their work? Because they left their marks in places no one was ever supposed to see. Deep inside the Great Pyramid, hidden in the narrow gaps above the king's chamber, workers left graffiti that survives to this day. They didn't write, "Help us." They wrote team names. One gang called themselves the Friends of Khufu. Another, perhaps having a bit more fun with their rations, called themselves the Drunkards of Menkaure. Yes, they named themselves. These inscriptions tell us that these men weren't being driven to their deaths, they were competing. They had team spirit. They were part of a brotherhood, building something they knew would outlast time itself. Think about the sheer opportunity cost of the Great Pyramid. For 20 years, the most powerful nation on earth funneled its wealth, its grain, its best engineers, and its entire labor force into a single point in the desert. Why not build dozens of magnificent palaces? Why not hundreds of temples to all the gods? Why not 1,000 golden statues? Why something this massive? To the ancient Egyptians, the pyramids weren't just buildings. They were machines for eternity, Egyptian belief about death. To the Egyptians, death was not the end. It was a transition, a treacherous journey through the underworld that required a physical anchor in the world of the living. They believed the human soul was a complex architecture of different parts. Ka, the life force. This required the physical body to survive. If the body decayed, the Ka would starve. Ba, the personality, the part that could travel between the worlds of the living and the dead. Ak, the immortal spirit, the final, transfigured state that would live among the gods. The pyramid was a fortress designed to protect the pharaoh's mummified body, shielding it from grave robbers and the elements, so the soul could live forever. But it was more than a safe. It was a launch pad. The internal shafts of the Great Pyramid are not air vents, they are astronomical pointers. They align with the circumpolar stars, stars like the North Star that never set below the horizon. To the Egyptians, these were the imperishable ones. Because they never died by setting, they symbolized eternity. The pharaoh did not just die. Through the pyramid, he ascended. The structure was a stone stairway to the stars, a massive battery of spiritual energy meant to catapult the king into the company of the gods, ensuring that as long as the pyramid stood, the order of the universe remained intact. The Giza Plateau was not chosen randomly. It was a masterpiece of site selection, balancing cold, hard engineering with deep religious symbolism. The geological advantages first, the engineering. You cannot place 6 million tons of weight on soft sand, the structure would sink and tilt. Types of stones used in the construction of pyramid. Solid limestone bedrock. Giza provided a massive, stable platform of natural rock that could support the weight without shifting. Elevated ground. The plateau sits high above the valley floor. It was safe from the annual flooding of the Nile, ensuring the construction site remained dry and accessible year-round. Proximity to the Nile. While it was high enough to stay dry, it was close enough to the river to allow for massive transport canals to be dug, bringing the Tura limestone and Aswan granite directly to the base of the construction site. In Egyptian belief, the east equals life. This is where the sun rises. It was the land of the living, where the cities and palaces were built. The west equals death. This is where the sun dies every evening. The west was the gateway to the Duat, the underworld. Giza lies west of the Nile. It was the land of the dead. By building on the western horizon, the pharaohs were positioning themselves at the exact point of sunset, where they could follow the sun into the afterlife every single day. They weren't built by a cult of death. They were built by a civilization obsessed with life. They were so convinced of the importance of the human spirit that they felt 6 million tons of stone was a fair price to pay to keep it alive. When we look at Giza, we aren't just looking at a tomb. We are looking at the oldest surviving evidence of human ambition. It is a reminder that 4,500 years ago, people didn't just accept the world as it was. They used math, stone, and the power of the Nile to reshape reality. The mystery of how they were built will always fascinate us. But the mystery of why is what defines us. Because in the heart of the desert, on a solid limestone plateau, the ancient Egyptians proved that if you dream big enough, not even death can stop you. When we look at the Great Pyramid, we usually focus on its height or its age. But the most staggering feat isn't how high it goes, it's the direction it faces. To put that in perspective, that is more accurate than the Eiffel Tower, Big Ben, or the White House. If you were to try and align a building today using only your eyes and a piece of string, you wouldn't even come close. And remember, the ancient Egyptians had no compass. They didn't have GPS. They didn't even have a pole star like we do today, because, due to the Earth's wobble, Polaris wasn't in the right spot 4,500 years ago. So, how did they do it? For centuries, people claimed this was proof of divine or alien intervention. But the truth is much more grounded, and far more impressive. They did it using the stars. Specifically, they likely tracked the movement of two stars, Kochab and Mizar. By using a tool called a merkit, a simple sighting instrument made of a palm rib, they observed the night sky. They waited for the moment when these two specific stars aligned vertically in the sky. By dropping a plumb line at that exact moment, they could mark a line on the ground that pointed directly to the celestial pole. This required clear skies, which the Egyptian desert provided in abundance. Repeated observation. They didn't do this once, they did it over years to account for error. Advanced geometry, the ability to translate a point in the sky to a perfectly straight line on a limestone plateau. We often say, 2.3 million blocks, so quickly that we forget what that actually means. Let's break down the math. 2.3 million blocks of stone. The average weight of each block is 2.5 tons. But inside the king's chamber, there are granite beams weighing 50 to 80 tons. The total construction time was roughly 25 years. Do the math. If you want to finish this project in 25 years, your workers have to place one block every 2 to 3 minutes. That is one block, weighing as much as an SUV, quarried, shaped, transported across the Nile, dragged up a ramp, and set with sub-millimeter precision, every 3 minutes. 24 hours a day. For 25 years straight. Without a single hydraulic crane. Without a single internal combustion engine. Without modern machines. This was not brute force. You cannot achieve that kind of speed and accuracy with just more slaves or more whips. This was precision logistics. We now know, thanks to recent discoveries like the Diary of Mirror, that the Egyptians didn't just drag stones across the sand. They built an intricate system of canals that brought the Nile right to the foot of the pyramid. They used water as their highway. They had specialized teams. One group was responsible for the quarrying in Aswan. Another for the transport. Another for the leveling of the base, which, by the way, is so level that the corners of the 13-acre base differ by less than an inch. They likely achieved this by flooding the foundation area with water and using the water level as a natural, spirit level, to cut the rock. This level of organization suggests a society that was unified by a single, obsessive goal. The Great Pyramid wasn't just a building, it was the ultimate test of human willpower. Every block placed was a victory over the impossible. We look for secret rooms and hidden chambers, and they are there. But the real secret isn't what's hidden inside the stone. It's the stone itself. It is the proof that 4,500 years ago, humans weren't primitive. They were masters of the earth and the stars. They understood the rotation of the planet, the weight of the mountains, and the geometry of the heavens. They built the Great Pyramid to be eternal. And as it stands there, perfectly aligned to the north, perfectly level, and perfectly massive, it sends a message across the millennia: don't underestimate what the human mind can achieve when it refuses to accept impossible as an answer. The Great Pyramid was constructed using 3 distinct types of stone, each selected for its specific properties. Local limestone formed the massive core structure. Tura limestone created a gleaming outer casing. Aswan granite protected the sacred internal chambers. But here is the detail that breaks the brain of modern logistics: the granite used for the heart of the pyramid came from Aswan, nearly 800 kilometers away. That is roughly the distance from New York City to Charlotte, North Carolina. And they moved these stones without trucks. Without cranes. Without a single drop of fuel. The Great Pyramid was not a monolithic block of one material. It was a sophisticated composite. Each stone had a job to do. Local limestone, the core. The vast majority of the 2.3 million blocks came from limestone quarries right next to the Giza Plateau. These are the stones you see today. These stones were chosen because they were relatively soft and easy to cut with copper tools. By quarrying them right next to the site, the Egyptians reduced transport time to virtually zero, allowing for the mass production of the 2.5-ton blocks that form the pyramid's bulk. Tura limestone, the outer casing. But the pyramid didn't always look like a giant staircase. In antiquity, it was encased in a smooth, brilliant white exterior of limestone from Tura, across the Nile. This limestone was extremely fine-grained, bright white, and polished to a mirror-like finish. When complete, the Great Pyramid wouldn't have looked like stone, it would have shined like a mountain of light, reflecting the Egyptian sun so brightly it could be seen for miles. Today, almost all these casing stones are gone, stolen and reused over the centuries to build the mosques and palaces of Cairo. Aswan granite, the interior chambers. Finally, we have the immortal stone. The hardest stone of all came from Aswan. Granite is significantly harder than limestone. It cannot be cut with copper, it requires dolerite pounders and a level of patience that is almost alien to our modern world. Granite was used only where strength and permanence mattered most, the king's chamber. The relieving chambers. Key structural elements. Some of these blocks weigh 50 to 80 tons. Even today, with our massive diesel-powered cranes and hydraulic lifts, moving and precisely placing an 80-ton block would be a feat of extreme difficulty. The Egyptians did it 450 feet in the air, using nothing but wood, rope, and the sheer power of the human spirit. In our world of diamond-tipped saws and laser cutters, we look at the Great Pyramid and assume there must be a secret. We search for lost high technology or ancient power tools because we cannot fathom how a civilization could achieve this level of precision with the materials of the Bronze Age. The Egyptians had no iron tools, no steel saws, no power equipment. Iron was a rarity, and steel didn't exist. So how did they cut 2.3 million blocks of stone, some of which are the hardest materials on the planet, so precisely? The tools they actually used. Archaeology gives us a very clear, albeit humble, answer. The Egyptians didn't have magic, they had an intimate understanding of the physical world. They used copper chisels, dolerite pounding stones, wooden wedges, sand as an abrasive. Now, if you try to cut limestone or granite with a copper chisel, you'll find that copper is far too soft. It will blunt and bend within minutes. But the Egyptians knew a secret. Copper alone is just the carrier. The real worker was the sand, specifically, quartz sand. Quartz sand is harder than limestone. It is even harder than some forms of granite. The process was a masterpiece of physics. They would score the stone surface to create a guide. Add a slurry of sand and water into the groove. Saw back and forth with long copper blades. The copper blade would pick up the grains of sand, pressing them into the stone. The sand acted like the teeth on a modern saw, grinding away the rock atom by atom. For the massive granite blocks, they used dolerite balls, round, incredibly hard stones found in the desert, to pound away at the rock until it took the desired shape. This process was undeniably slow. It could take weeks to cut through a single large block. But in ancient Egypt, time was not the enemy. Labor was plentiful, and the pharaoh's reign was long. Accuracy was the goal. Fact, modern experimental archaeologists, like those at the Ancient Egypt Research Associates, have replicated these techniques successfully. They have proven that with enough patience and enough sand, you can cut through solid granite using nothing but copper and muscle. No lost technology is required. No mystery tools are needed. Just patience and the laws of physics. Cutting the stone is one thing. Moving it is another. This is the question everyone asks. This is the part where people start reaching for theories about levitation or giant machines. A single block in the core weighs as much as a pickup truck. But those 80-ton granite beams. They weigh as much as 2 modern battle tanks. And remember the constraints: no wheels, the wheel wouldn't be used for heavy transport in Egypt for centuries. No pulleys. No cranes. So how do you move the weight of a tank across a desert?